Thank you guys so much for coming out to the Connect, the Extraction Chronicles. It's finally here, guys, so thank you. Round of applause for everyone coming out. So first, let's thank your sponsors, Legacy Farms. Thank you guys so much for hosting the event. Home with the Connect. Appreciate you guys. Also want to say thank you to Indoor Sun Hydro, keeping us fed, keeping the drinks flowing. Thank you guys. Other sponsors, Copert. So if you guys haven't gotten your IPM discussions yet with Miss Mary, make sure you grab some bugs on the way out from Miss Mary. Thank you, Mary. All right, guys. So Dalton Stone has been talking to me about putting together this panel for so long now. We've been doing the Connect for a couple years now. Every event he pulls me aside and he's like, Serge, when are we gonna start talking extraction? Cultivation's great, but yeah, let's talk extraction. I'm like, Dalton, why? Like, we need to get there eventually, but he's like, no, dude, every cultivator needs to have an extraction partner. You need to maximize your yields. What the hell are you talking about, Dalton? So this evolution of the conversation really started getting into the world of extraction that, quite frankly, I'm not too comfortable with. That's not a world that I live in. I'm genetics and cultivation. So being up here with these guys, I'm not gonna start talking about stuff that I don't know. So I brought the experts up here. And that's really what we're gonna be doing tonight, is really getting the experts' opinions, perspectives, and really driving solutions to why you need to have your own extraction and cultivation relationships. So, most importantly, Dalton, I'm gonna let you kind of kick us off here.
Appreciate it.
That's it.
I appreciate you guys. Let's give a round of applause for Serge for putting this all together and making it actually happen. But no, like he's saying, I think it's important for all of the cultivators. I think it's important for all the cultivators to truly find some type of extraction partnership or whatever your brand is calling for with your excess biomass. Like you guys are growing all this flower and you guys are trimming it all down. So like at the end of the day, where's your trim go? Is it going into some type of ethanol system, hydrocarbon system, or various other forms if it can go into some type of rosin situation, but that's not very likely. But it's really just understanding like where your biomass should be ending up and what type of product SKU and what you're expecting as a cultivator if we're doing any type of like tolling work and trying to please you and make sure we're both happy at the end of the day when we get your biomass. So it really starts with you guys and just getting us good biomass at the end of the day and doing what we can do best from our side of the field or our side of the industry.
And we were just getting into the tolling discussion. So I want to introduce our other panelists up here. So Keon Houston, founder of Eminent Extracts Type 6 here in Sacramento.
How you guys doing?
Yes, sir. And from our cultivation perspective, we've got the Canopy King, Mr. Kevin Crouch from Delighted.
What's up, guys?
Let's jump into the first topic. First slide should be, what is extraction? Dalton, you want to take that away?
Yeah, basically, so some technical difficulties. But no, basically, what is extraction from like a cultivator's point of view, depending on like what you guys really need to know about it. I see some extractors out here, so this might be a little bit repetitive to you guys, but really it's about taking all those trichomes and dissolving them into some type of solution, whether it's an alcohol solution or a hydrocarbon solution or just simple ice water extraction where you're just keeping those trichome heads suspended. The main like difference really where it comes to like what type of extraction you guys should be doing or using when it comes to your like trim is really what is the quality of the trim or the biomass inputs, because not everything's going to make a good concentrate to dab or some type of cured resin pen. That's just get your cannabinoids out of it or make your distillate out of it and then figure out where you need to put that product, whether it's an infused pre-roll or some type of edible, and just back into the market with your purified cannabinoids at the end of the day. So I mean, bring up some ethanol extraction.
So I'm an ethanol extractor, solventless extractor, preferably the fire in, fire out. Everybody knows that terminology, correct? You know, so me receiving good biomass, whether it's full term, mixed light, auto flower, my thing is I thrive on high potency THC, and that's my thing. You know, cold ethanol extraction, 3 times filtered to to give you the highest results and potency when it comes to distillate. Piss yellow, everybody knows piss yellow if you guys are in the distillate industry, or you guys in the distillate market, you know, carts, et cetera. Also food grade, we thrive on just pretty much making the best product we can get and extracting the highest yields that we can get from any biomass that you bring us.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. Like you said, we're just trying to maximize like what we're getting off your guys' biomass. So whether it is some type of distillate SKU or some type of BHO SKU, it's really just coming down to like what is on the biomass. Is it high in potency? Does it have a terpene concentration? 'Cause like really for like the hydrocarbon field, it's like, well, we can get cannabinoids from anything. It's really like, where are we going to pull our terpene profiles from? So that's really, if we're doing those cured runs, it's really selective on like, okay, it's trim, but it has, wow, this like terp profile on it's stellar. It's crazy. Let's run it through this. But if it's just like bland and it's not really like doing anything too impressive, let's hand it over to the ethanol guys and just like make a jar of distillate, and they do their thing, making beautiful jars, nice light yellow color. So there's all these different avenues that this trim or this product can go into after you guys are done growing it for all that.
Quick question about the color. Quick question about the color. Light or dark? Talk about the difference.
I mean, it really depends on your like product SKU. So like with hydrocarbons, there's going to be a wide range depending on what type of filtration media you're using, if any. Is it fresh frozen? Is it cured resin? What does the actual like biomass look like at the trichome level? So it's like if that's already oxidized, you can expect definitely to see some type of a darker color with a solvent extraction. So, but that gives you the option. If you see something that's like super dark, we'll open your CRC filtration, your color remediation chromatography or column, and that's really going to start to pull some of those unwanted color compounds. But you really need to understand what type of media you're using, because that can go in a lot of different ways. You're not only going to start pulling some of those colors, you can start to affect your terpene profiles from the hydrocarbon perspective. But for the distillate side, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on that, as far as darker, older material, stuff like that, we can render it down. Just takes multiple passes to purify, to get the color excellent, get the color correct. Versus the CRC, when you work in CRC, it's a totally different process on our end, being a solventless guy versus the CRC. So I want to touch on like old material or moldy material per se. You know, there's money to be made in that. If you got material that's sitting, you can blow it BHO, you can take it solventless. Technically, on the inside, when it's indoors, it'll yield pretty much more better. It yields more better when it's indoor, molded, etc. You can just bring it into us, you know.
Yeah, it's like, don't let anything with cannabinoids really go down to like any type of waste revenue or waste stream. It's
Correct.
like, bring it over to some type of extraction platform and like work with your extractors, build that relationship to figure out like, where does this biomass need to go? Hey, I got 200-300 pounds of something that looks like this. And it's like, well, let's put that over to the distillate side. Or, man, I wish you would have told me sooner and kept it in the chest freezer just to preserve whatever terps is left on there. But let's definitely have those conversations, because like, just because the finished flour's done in its jars, that doesn't mean that the whole process isn't over. Like, you can look into the like petroleum industry. It's like they really capture every single thing from jet fuels, our hydrocarbons that we use, all types of like rubbers and plastics. So it's like we need to apply that same principle into like the cannabis industry and really just maximize all the compounds and cannabinoids that we're able to get from this plant. So it's like really just capturing everything. So we can do that. So just give us your guys' biomass. One way or another, we'll get you guys some oil back.
Yeah, I got something to add on the cultivation side when it comes to color. I know most of these guys want to put their biomass in a cold freezer, somewhere cold right away. When you're cultivating, you kind of want to start that process while it's still growing. You know, you kind of want to taper down the temps a little later, get the leaf surface temp down, and you'll get that color, a little brighter color starting earlier, and then you finish that with these guys in freezers or whatever method to keep it nice and cold and keep those trichome heads solid where they were at when they were harvested.
That's a great point, Kevin. I don't want to veer too far off the main subject, but I do have a curiosity. I hear that you're supposed to harvest earlier if you're trying to grow for solventless extraction. Keon, do you want to touch a little bit about that?
Yes. harvesting earlier for solvent is good. We can go anywhere from 5, 6, 7 weeks pull down. As long as it's fresh frozen, you guys freeze it, you procure it right, and keep it at -20, so that way it does stay live when it gets over to my lab or to an extractor that does solventless. It holds up way better, and that's when we're looking at the milky trichomes that fire, light gold, clear down on see-through solventless rosin that you guys see in the market right now. It's pretty much from taking that and freezing it 5, 6 weeks. If you go full term, 8 weeks, that's even better. Higher yields on that.
Right. And this comes back to genetics, right? You need to have a plan.
Genetics.
You need to know what the hell you're growing so you can make sure that you have a strategy and you have an extraction partner that's ready to come and help you out with that process as well.
Definitely. So if you're looking for more terpene profile and you're looking for higher yields, it just depends. Everything yields different, but if you more pungent it is with the genetics that's being grown, higher the terpene profile, more fire that your rosin will end up being post-process.
So Dalton, take us into the hydrocarbon slide here. So let's touch a little bit on that, right? Because there's a term here, hydrophobic, and I think that kind of encapsulates why hydrocarbon extraction is what it is.
Yeah, it's so hydrophobic just means it doesn't want to pull any water. It's afraid of water, so there's not going to be any interference. So with other like alcohol extractions, if you're not running your solvent cold enough, you're going to start to pull. You can't run fresh frozen with that, or really would you want to? You're literally just destroyed all those terps on there. You're not going to be able to capture any of that like living essence at that point. So it's really just like using these solvents that aren't going to pull any of the moisture. That's going to just pull that super clean terpene profile in the hydrocarbon field because it has such a low boiling point. You're able to dissolve all those trichomes, get it over to your collection pot and start that purging process. But as that gas evaporates or that residual solvent, you're still left with this beautiful terpene profile that left the like essence of that plant intact when you actually have a finished product in your hands. But that's pretty much the gist. Like hydrocarbons, it's best suited for fresh frozen extractions. That's where you really get the most bang for your buck. But you can do plenty of like trim runs, nug runs, dried material. You can do crude runs if you really want to. It's really one of those solvents that gives you a lot of different options in your processing, and then a lot of scalability as we start to like progress in the industry. Like alcohol, you're able to get a lot of throughput in your labs, but you're missing some of those terpene profiles. You're not able to capture some of these things that we need in the industry from the actual plant. You can get botanical terpenes derived from like other plants, but really if you just focus in on like a good hydrocarbon process or a good hydrocarbon terpene profile, that's really what we're all looking for as like true consumers that really want to taste like these flavors that you guys are putting out, the grape gas, high fructose corn syrup. Like some of these, it's like, man, like I want to smoke some live resin of this. We need some of this. Like anybody cultivating it out here, we need to talk after we're done with this. So, but hydrocarbons are really just give you a lot of options for what type of product you want to make, whether it's fresh frozen or cured or diamonds batter.
And would you say that you can probably get a wider array of flavors using hydrocarbon extraction compared to solventless, just because something isn't going to wash above, what is it, 2 or 3%? Like, which you really need to make sure that if it's not above 2%, then you really shouldn't be focusing on like washing that, right?
Well, on the wash side, obviously hydrocarbons are going to yield way more than solventless all day long. You just get a more terpier, more better profile on the solventless, and that's preference. If somebody doesn't like BHO and they want to just, I'm all natural and I just want a solventless product, then you go either way. But hands down, you're going to get a bigger yields. You're going to get a higher terpene profile with the hydrocarbons. In my experience, in my theory,
Anything else before we move on to solventless?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I think Abstracts actually put out a pretty interesting white paper that was talking about, I think they ran papaya through a solventless extraction and a solvent-based hydrocarbon extraction, all fresh frozen. They really didn't see too much of a difference in the finished product or like what they sent out as a sample. They seen a little bit higher terpene concentration with the BHO, but that's not to say that the rosin didn't give you a different experience, a different type of mouthfeel, a different palate. So it's like they both have their unique points in the market. It's definitely interesting to smoke some rosin, get that flavor profile, and smoke some BHO, the same strain, and get that flavor profile and kind of like pick out the subtle nuances like between both of these product SKUs. So both of them have their place in the market at the end of the day. Hydrocarbons and solvents, there's a greater scalability with them because you're getting a lot higher of a yield. It's not so strain dependent. You don't have to really grow some type of washer just to make it viable.
And hydrocarbon is less labor intensive as well. Because if
That
you
is
deal
true.
with solventless, it's back-breaking work. It's a lot of work, you know.
We'll get you in the back, man. We got you.
All right, moving on to solventless, which I know we've already been touching on, but you know, this is the world of the hype channel right now, right? You got hash holes, you got a bunch of different flavors that are just extremely flavorful and wonderful experience. I mean, like, let's talk about this. So what is it that you wanted to kind of go through when we talk about solventless?
Pretty much what I'm looking for when I'm grabbing solventless material to run is terpenes all day long. I'm not a big fan of like color like purplish or gelatos or like that because they don't press right when I normally run them. They come out pretty dark. So I'm tending to look for more of the terpene-ish. The more terpy, lighter color, grape gas. One of my favorites was from Finest. It was the what is it called? The Slurricane. It yielded, had a crazy ass terpene profile, and it was just one of the most like fires things. So when I'm looking for, you know, good material, good sticky, good fire, good cured, to run some good solid rosin, whether it's trim or fresh frozen, either way.
And I typically see a lot of GMOs, a lot of papayas, right? Because they're hash dumpers.
GMOs
like those
are fire.
heavy yield.
Yeah, GMOs, they yield pretty well, and the terpene profile of those always is kick ass on those.
So Kevin, I'd love to tap into you on this one because I know you guys have ran so many different phenos and different breeding projects over the years at Delighted. And, you know, first off, how many beans are you popping each month?
It's probably up near about 200.
200 beans per month, like consistently.
Somewhere in there, yeah. Give or take a week here or there, you know, but yeah, and a lot of GMOs, you know, I've said it before, but that's probably what has dominated our menu for the last 2 or 3 years is GMO crosses. And it, for the same reason you're explaining is, you know, it dumps on the yield side, the hash side, and if you can get a short flowering version of it, you're winning. Otherwise, on the cultivation side, GMO is not pleasant. But
has there been any specific genetics that you've been surprised that actually turned into hash dumpers?
we do so many, so that's a tough one. But there's definitely some that I would say probably the opposite is you'll see something with crazy frost at the bottom of the bag, and you're like, oh, this has got to be a winner, and then it actually is not. I usually get surprised on that side more than anything. But yeah, all over the map with that.
Guys, let's touch on the trichomes.
I was going to say, and that's a interesting topic too to talk about. Like, there hasn't really been too many data points for like a direct correlation with cannabinoid content on your biomass. When it comes to solventless yields, it's going to go through that hit or miss. It's really up to that like trichome size and like style, and that's something I'm not really too familiar with. I just like playing with my hydrocarbons and my solvents, but what goes into that side of the things, like I said, they haven't really seen that direct correlation between the two on potency and solventless yields. So I think that's like an interesting topic. It really comes down to like what is available or what size trichome you have at the end of the day.
I touch on this. Trichome size, I normally tend to stay between like a 73, 120, 73 micron, even down to like a 45, depending on what strain it is. And if it's fresh frozen or just regular good sugar trim, sometimes the 45 will press better than the 73 or 120 or 90 through 120, you know? So it's all variable in preference.
Kev, you touched on something that I think we've all been through, right? We see those phenos that are just iced out, and then you go for the test wash, and it doesn't dump at all, right? So we start talking about
that's
what
when you send it to me. We'll still get you a 20% yield.
There you go. So the trichome density, right? So we're looking at either a greasy trichome on the touch or a grainy trichome on the touch. So as we're making these genetic selections, we're looking for certain cultivars that have that grainy touch on the trichome head. And why is that?
I mean, for the solventless side, it like there's not a real like direct correlation. Yeah, if it or on the solvent side, yeah, if it yields on the solventless side, it's going to dump for the solventless or solvent extractors. That's just kind of how it goes. It seems to be, but like regardless on the trichome size and what type is actually on the strain, like that's what kind of makes the hydrocarbon field and solvent field so versatile. You're able to run a large pool of varieties of phenotypes, strains, flavors to really kind of capture what you want. Like, oh, I want a gelato flavor, I want X, or whatever type of flavor that you're not really able to see in the solventless side. So it's like you're able to kind of pull that out of the industry. The solvent side or solventless side's a little bit different. You really got to be selective. So I'm not sure if that kind of narrows down your guys' like flavor pool and like what you're able to get out of like the industry and make. But it is interesting to see because like solventless or solvent guys, we can run basically like whatever we want to and get, as long as the terps are on the biomass, we'll be able to pull that out and capture that.
On the solventless side, I wouldn't say not necessarily, because sometimes I've ran material that had terps, and then when you went to go press, the terps weren't there. It was real plant matter is smelling. It took time to cure, so either we had to cold cure it or put it in the vac oven, sit it at like 65 for a couple of days, beat it up, batter it up, and then the terpenes that finally kick out after like 3 to 5, maybe 7 days. Then terp profile will come out of it, but not also. Tumbling. I don't know if anybody know about tumbling, dry ice, keeping it cold and pulling the terps off like that. And then pressing, I mean, I had best results with that without even having to put it in any water and they're introducing it to ice. Just cold, tumbling, dry ice, pressing it, and I get some good, clear material looking like this here on the
And
trike
that's just
side.
making the trichome head so brittle.
Getting the fire trichome head, sorting it out, and then pressing like that. And I mean, the profile is there.
So tumbling with dry ice.
Uh-huh.
Is that what you just touched on?
Yeah, tumbling
Wow.
with dry ice. Yeah, definitely. Some good sugar trim that's been cured correctly. That as long as it's 3 to 7 days off from being trimmed, throw it in there, and it yields crazy. You get a bigger yield versus putting it in water that way as well, and your output similar to this here. Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to touching on why a grainy trichome head is important. Right, because it's not going to rupture when you're agitating and breaking it up.
Exactly. As long as you don't beat it too rough, too hard, and you're about at a 220 micron, you break it down, and you could totally isolate each trichome head to your likings, press it, test it out, and whatever works for you works for you. So the more grainy you get, the fatter heads, you can get rid of the stems, and narrow it down that way.
Cool. On to the next. Maximizing yields, which I think we were just kind of touching on that, but what else? What are some other best practices from a cultivation side that leads into their extraction partner discussions that should be happening? Like, this is one of those things that, Dalton, you really caught my attention. It's like, you're throwing away all this stuff that we could be making money together, but we just didn't know how. So touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think Kevin kind of talked about it too from like my point of view, like keeping your cooling your rooms down a little bit before harvest, or like getting that biomass, whether it is like cured and trimmed material, getting it as cold as you can after you're done like dealing with it and working with it as a cultivator is going to increase our terpene concentration. So that's going to be maximizing that aspect of the yield. And then as far as the lower grade material, like just fan leaves that may have just like 10% potency on them, or there's no real terps on there. It's like, I hear so many people like, oh, we're just like kind of throwing it away. We really don't know what to do with it. And it's like, well, grab the cannabinoids off it and figure out if you want to make some type of product SKU. So like for a hydrocarbon guy, it's like we can run like lower grade material and just like take a bunch of THCA off of it for infused pre-rolls, or you can take that low grade material and make a bunch of distillate for some type of edible company or some type of food grade product, tinctures, gummies, whatever you kind of want to do as a brand. But it's like recapturing all those cannabinoids after you guys are done with like the cultivation side of it. Or if like you have the intention on like doing a grow or a harvest just for extraction, we're going to do fresh frozen or X, Y, and Z, figuring out where that biomass needs to go to get your best yields. Does it need to go to somebody that's running just ice water, no solvents, or does it not yield for them? So it's like, well, we still want to make some type of live resin product, so it needs to go into the hydrocarbon market or extraction field, so we can make you guys that type of extractor product, so it doesn't really go towards the total waste. And if you have any issues during the 8 weeks of cultivating that flower, and it's like, man, we got hit with, God forbid, some type of like mold problem or something, send it over to like us. We can still remediate that product and still get that like terpene profile and like make sure like the total run's not a loss at the end of the day. Because I mean, like I said, God forbid if that happens, but you hear the horror stories every once in a while. It's like you guys spent a lot of time, then like something wonky happens, and it's like, what do we do here? It's like, all right, well, it probably didn't want to send it to us, but we'll take it, and we'll probably be happy about it, even if there is a little bit of mold on it, just to get some like fire, like terps and like some good material on it that really was like either some like exotic strain or something crazy that we really don't usually see. So it's always nice to get that. Or like, I think when we did our first collab with Delighted, they had some stuff that wasn't really fitting them. So it's like, well, we could work together, and we took some of that and took some other strains, but that stuff came out phenomenal.
And to touch on, like you said, if you guys run into any issues, spider mites, etc., like you said, Lord forbids that happens, that can come through to us. We'll catch that in micron bags if you go on solventless, or if you go into ethanol, we could trap molds, all of that stuff like that. You don't have to worry about heavy metals or anything when you're doing solventless extraction. That pretty much we could pull all of that. Well, I can say I can pull all of that out of there for you, need be. So don't think it's just total loss. If you run into spider mites, mold, any material that turns, blood rot, all that stuff, there is a return on that stuff.
Your power goes out, you lose your HVAC or dehums. Yes, sir. Things happen.
The power goes out, everything Hermes, send it to me. I'll get it right.
Exactly. Call your local extractor for sure.
Yeah, as a grower, I think we've all been there, maybe.
So I mean, like we kind of talked about, like as a cultivator, what do you guys want to make? If you guys want to make some type of product SKU in the concentrated field or the extraction market, it's like for the solventless side of things, you need to go into that grow and that round of cultivation, knowing that like this biomass is going to go into that field, because they got to be super selective on that. Solventless side, it's really just about like, what quality is the biomass? Where should this end up as a finished product? Is it just like low grade, there's not enough terps on it to really make something that we want to like crack open and take a dab of or smoke out of a vape pen? So that's just like, let's just go make some distillate out of it and grab those cannabinoids. But if it is something that you've like had a nice run on, you trimmed it, the trim smells like super terpy, you put it in some type of chest freezer before an extractor picked it up, and it's like, we're able to like run that and extract that and make various different types of products, whether it's vape pens or some type of diamond or batter, anything that has those natural terpenes still intact with that actual profile or that actual strain. But the solventless side can be a little bit different.
Definitely. I'm having a little hard time hearing on this side with the fan blowing, but I'm trying to tune in. But another thing I wanted to touch on with the solventless side of things, there's multiple ways to recover to maximize your yields. And I know this is probably off topic of what's going on the screen right now, but I did want to bring this to attention. If you're running solventless and say we press and we have a bunch of pucks that are left over, what we typically do, we'll soak those in ethanol, and then you can, I've seen yields up to 35, 45% out of those pucks that I would then distill down and be able to make 2-3 liters out of that material that was passed on. So you can have a wide range of products, some solventless and some distillate off of that. So if you have a got multiple product lines, a vape line, solventless line, you'll definitely be able to run into, 2 parts out of that and damn near get 90 to 100% yield on your material. Yeah, but all right.
No, that's true. It's always like kind of surprising, like what you can get out of like just cleaning stuff in labs and stuff. You're like, whoa, like we're they kind of waste all this? Or are we sure about this?
Especially like with pot exchange, there's a lot of pot. I don't know if it did on the BHO side. There's a lot of like pot exchange and stuff like that. We try to like maximize and recoup all of that stuff. That way you can get a bigger yield. I tend to aim for 60, 65, up to 70% return from crude to distillate and high potency. So. And that's the same way on the solventless side. Solventless side, we're normally hitting on the press side 55, 60, sometimes 70% on a press from bubble hash to actual live rosin, batters, etc.
Yeah, so biomass selection, man, it all really starts with like guys like Serge, guys like Kevin figuring out doing their magic in the cultivation side of the things. For a solvent extraction, really what I just want to see is just something that has like a super unique terp profile. Like, and you guys are the ones able to do that, doing these breeding programs and projects and different types of pheno hunts. So it's like there's so many gelatos, there's so many of the same flavors in the market, so it's like really being able to like differentiate yourself from like a flavor profile on the shelf. So it's like you can grab your cannabinoids from anything, but maybe spend a little bit extra money buying that exotic fresh frozen or something that's special and pulling those terps from that, just because where else is it on the shelf as concentrate? I see so many like batches of like fire flower, and I'm like, man, I wish I had some of this biomass to extract this or see what this would taste like in some type of concentrated form. So like biomass selection, it really starts with you guys and giving like unique profiles over to extractors. Like we've all heard like back in the early distillate days, like oil fields, and it's just like this is acres just for cannabinoids. It's like, well, I want some acres of just fresh frozen, some fire terps, something super unique, not just yields good, but like is different in the market. There's so much like of the same strains being grown at like kind of every farm. Everybody has their unique inputs on how they cultivate it, but it's really just like these breeding projects that you guys are doing, the genetics that you're releasing, if they are viable for solventless, that's great, but it's really just like super unique terpene profiles, or like something that, like I said, it was really just super unique terpene profiles, some super gassy. Some GMO really like killed the market just because like, well, this is like literally like garlic and onions. I was talking to you about the high fructose corn syrup. I think it's GMO to Skittles.
GMO times OZ Kush BX2.
Yeah, it's like the flower of it smells incredible. I heard it yields great for solventless, but like the terps, when you concentrate it down, it's like, wow, this is like some candy funk onion. It's like that's really going to make your product so much better. It's like having something that's different than your basic gelatos at the end of the day. But solventless side's like, I don't know if it's more difficult or harder when it comes to biomass selections, when it comes to like looking at those.
It's very
trichomes.
difficult.
I mean,
you want the best, you want the
sometimes.
highest trikes that you can see when it comes to it, solventless. Other than that, you're just gonna run, do all that labor, and you press, and that shit's gonna be dark, and you're gonna be pissed. So, fresh is the best, always.
If you guys do any like trim runs when the solventless side, is it really like, can you tell if it's like real fresh trim that you guys are running? Is it telling like
Yeah,
the
you can
color
tell.
and everything?
You could pretty much tell. It's still sticking. It'll clump up just like a fresh pound of flour. It'll just be clumped up, so you know it's pretty fresh at that point. You know, so.
I mean,
That's that's the panel. So this is it, guys. So if hopefully you've had a couple of minutes to think about some questions that you've loved to ask the panelists up here. But guys, before we move into the Q&A, did you have any final thoughts on any of these topics?
I got some kind of minor, but I think you do your extractor a favor letting them know if you spray anything, you know, especially in flower. So if you have an IPM program and say it involves sulfur, it involves any sort of oils, it's probably wise to let them know. They can know what filters they need to put in before they get your material.
That's a great point, Kevin, because a lot of times, you know you're planning not to spray anything after week 3 in flower, right? You're making sure that everything is kind of taken care of at that point. You've got your biocontrol in place, right, Mary? You've got our sachets, everything's good. So that's one of those things, like if something does happen, make sure you're transparent with your extractor, because that's part of it. You got to make sure that
It's
they're aware of
maintaining
it.
a good relationship, especially if, they're going to want to know that. I mean, they don't want to deal with your trim and then realize you sprayed sulfur on day 30, and they got to deal with the smell afterwards,
man, that's a death sentence. Any type of sulfur for an extractor, it's like, oh man, it is terrible what happens in the lab with any biomass that's been like contaminated with that. In our opinion, it's no good. We would definitely want to be transparent about that one when it comes down to it. And like, we're extracting all these compounds on the biomass, so it's like, if you guys are using anything that's on there that could be like detrimental to your health, like be open with us, let us know so we can either put some type of like remediation practices in place to kind of fix that product or take that out, because at the end of the day, like cannabinoids do have a value in the market, so it's not always like running like the best of the best. Like sometimes we do run into situations where it's like, man, this isn't ideal, but let's get the cannabinoids out for you so it's not a total loss on your end, and then make sure everybody's like clean and safe consuming this as a finished good or a finished product.
Sulfur. Do not spray sulfur. It's the worst shit, and send it to an extractor.
We probably won't
It's
pick up
worse than a
anything
stink
after that.
bomb, and that shit lingers for weeks, and it's horrible. Don't do it. But if you have some crude or anything, you need to get the sulfur off of it, the smell off of it. Send it to me. I can get it done for you though. But it sucks though. Dead ass. Sulfur sucks.
Appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you. Transparency. I mean,
Please.
that's the name of the game. Just be very transparent with your extraction partner, because shit happens. We know that it's not ideal. A lot of this material just doesn't even make it out to market. But if you have to make sure that you have the final opportunity to do something with it, just be transparent with your cultivation.
Another
extraction
thing,
partnership.
Molasses. I don't know if people still use molasses, but I get a lot of outdoor farms that still use molasses. It's the worst in extraction when it comes to ethanol. It tends to what we call like caramelized chlorophyll, or like sugars up real bad. So if you do use it, let us know. That way we know to extract way colder than we would normally do if we're negative 40 all the way up negative 60. That way we can lock those sugars out of there. Another thing. Yep.
Now that is interesting. I didn't really think about that one, but I've seen those batches where it's like, what is going on with this residue, or what's going on with this sugar consistency? But it's like I said, being transparent with your extractors, just like you want us to be with you guys. Like, what was the yield on this biomass, or like, what can you actually do with this biomass? It's a two-way street. So it's like, it all starts with you guys, though, growing that plant, getting us that, and letting us know what happened in your process.
Or just basically flushing properly. That's another thing that works best for us. The flush is good, we're good, you know. We're not gonna pull a lot of extra lipids, fats, et cetera, and have to deal with it, because it's a pain in the ass having to rerun. Something that takes me one time to do, I will have to do 2 or 3 times just to get a nice final output of the product. So, you know, transparency.
That's it. All right, guys. Any questions? I'm gonna start off right up here in front. Name and where you're from.
My name's Heidi, and I'm with Presidential Garden. We do cannabis construction and compliance. Question for you guys is, as the cultivators, how would you prefer temperature-wise if we're bringing you trim, not fresh frozen? And the other thing is quantity. You know, you're telling me, can I give you a pound? Do you need 5 pounds? You need 20 pounds? Kind of understanding what it is we need to provide to give you enough to do a run, and at what temperature we should be keeping that at. Because if we are smaller cultivators, obviously that's where it'll be, oh, I can't get enough off of this crop. I need to do 3 of them, so I need to preserve that. What's your recommended storage temperatures for that?
Are we going solventless? Are we going BHO? Are we going just rule of thumb?
All the above, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, if it's coming to distillate, it doesn't matter what temperature it is, you know. Doesn't matter if it's coming, like if you want to, you know, procure the terpenes and, you know, all that good old stuff, you want to have it nice and frozen and cold, per se, you know, either BHO or solventless side. Recommended rule of thumb for extraction on solventless, we would do 5 to 10 pounds on a small R&D batch. For ethanol, my thing is I need 100 pounds because I do like a rule of 10 to 1. So I typically process 1,000 pounds at a time. So 10% of 1,000, you give me 100 pounds, and I can, you know, scale from there of what the yields could particularly look like from there.
Good question. Thank you, Heidi. I had a question over here. Name and where you're from, sir.
Hey, Nate from Bell Costa Labs. And 2 things. First, a question, though. One of my favorite parts about extractions is the shelf life increase. If you look at high-quality cannabis, you throw it in a jar, 6 weeks later, it's not high-quality cannabis anymore, right?
Correct.
Anyhow, if you do something like that with extraction and keep it at good temperatures, then it's not quite the same concern. You can keep extraction, one could say, alive indefinitely in the right temperature conditions. Still, there is a shelf life. What do you think that shelf life is for well-preserved extractions? And I guess secondarily, do you have any concerns about how people outside of the normal, you know, keep it in a fridge or freezer? Do you have any concerns about how people store theirs long-term?
You want to touch on it?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's like, I mean, I think we're kind of living through that moment. How long can some of these jars and concentrates like last? We all kind of have our favorite like head stash of oil somewhere in our refrigerator, somewhere in our freezer. It's just like, man, like we'll break it out every once in a while to smoke with the homies. But I mean, I have jars that from like 2016, 2017 that you just kind of keep cold and you like preserve them just by keeping them cold. At the end of the day, these terpenes, they don't like any type of heat. Even at room temperature, like when you're opening your favorite jar of oil and that extract, like you being able to smell those terpenes, that's them literally like off gassing. So like the more times you do that, or the longer it's left out like on the table, just like chilling at room temperature, like those terpenes are just off gassing consistently. So if you want to save your product, I'd say it's like really make sure it's in like a sealed container and kind of just put it in your freezer and keep it as cold as possible. But when you go to like take a dab of it or consume it, like take it out and let it defrost. Don't just dig straight in there and let a bunch of like condensation on the inside of your oil and like get all up in there. It's not going to be good for your actual like dabbing and overall experience. That would probably lead to like faster degradation, in my opinion. And if it's solventless, it's like
If it's solventless, if it's something like a live rosin, you definitely don't want to leave it out in any kind of heat. You want to keep it as cold as possible, because if not, it's going to change. It's going to turn basically to batter for you. You know what I mean? So it'll come out clear, see through. You leave it in some heat, you got batter. You know, distillate. When it comes to distillate, shelf life. I got some distillate right now that I had for 2-3 years. That's still piss yellow.
that shit might survive like a nuclear war or something.
Yeah,
I don't think that's gonna go
you
anywhere.
don't got to worry about anything like that. Carts and stuff like that, since it's cut with terps, you'll tend to see a little oxidation on the top layer of a cart, and that's just basically from heating and the heating and cooling down like that. That's normal, so don't be freak out. Oh, it's red on top. Doesn't mean anything. To touch back on you saying as far as live raws, those are the most sensitive, I think, to heat and terpene preservation is the live rosin, solventless stuff like that, and BHO. I would say diamonds. I haven't seen too many fluctuation with diamond. I've seen heat, it clump up, shit like that, but those are survive a nuclear holocaust as well.
Right? Yeah. No. Seriously, some of those compounds are like super stable, so they really probably wouldn't go anywhere. But
Yeah.
you talk about terpenes, it's like if you're not
Terps,
keeping
whole
it
different
cold,
story.
they're going to be gone probably within a week or two.
Within a week, if you
depending
keep
on the
opening and
heat.
breaking it. But I say the longest I've seen some rosin that, well, it'll actually cure pretty good. Open and close it depends on where, what stability it was at. It'll have a crazier nose later. The nose might get better, and then sometimes too the nose might just fucking vape off. It really just depends on, the material that you're smoking on at that time as well. So.
Nice. Thank you, guys. Second, just a quick thought, and I don't know if it's so much of a question, but I have a theory in terms of what, it came up earlier, what separates, the live rosins from the live resins of the world and so forth. Bringing up the white paper, too, that Abstracts had released, where they said terpene value-wise and even cannabinoid value, it's not that different. So what I do notice, and, that I can't remember who made the point, but somebody did mention that some of the fruitier tones can get muted if you're talking BHO versus coming out really, really well in rosins. And the theory is that a lot of those fruitier kind of compounds, a lot of those are esters. Good examples, banana, isoamyl acetate, right? That's banana flavor, like just in one chemical pretty much. So isoamyl acetate is an ester. As much as you run terp tests on a banana strain, you're not going to find that ester in the terp tests, right?
100%.
But you are going to find, interestingly enough, with how water soluble it is, you are going to find that flavor expanded on quite a bit in something like a live rosin kind of strain, which is extracted through a water medium. And so I think it's really interesting, and maybe just a thought of what can separate some of these, because terpene-wise, yeah, you're going to see a lot of comparative elements. But if you go outside the terpenes to the thiols and the esters and the flavonoids and the ketones and the lactones, and keep going. It's deep breath. There's a
we
lot.
can talk about this forever.
It's a complex salad. But I think that's the difference too, is between different extraction methods. Some are primed for being able to extract, certain sets of compounds more beneficially than others. And you'll actually see, a give and take, not to say one's superior, it's preference based, but you'll see different selective bias between the extraction method used, going well beyond the terpenes and the cannabinoids. That was the thought. Let me know if you have anything to add.
No, 100%. That's the truth you're preaching right there. I mean, it's definitely interesting to see like what these various forms of extraction methods can pull out of this plant, whether it's like, you can go all the way back to like CO2, where everybody was like, well, it's solvent free or solventless. And it's like, well, we're still using solvents post-processing and like a bunch of wild stuff going on with that whole extraction process. But it was pulling cannabinoids out of the plant and certain compounds out of the plant. But like, as we fast forward into these different, or like having a different understanding of like what solubility this molecule has in the plant, and like, yeah, exactly. What's polar, what's non-polar, and what's the best solvent for this type of extraction is definitely going to be those like pioneer points. I feel like coming up in the industry to really kind of figure out like, is this strain, maybe it doesn't yield the best as like a washer, but like this is the best way to capture that terpene profile because it's solubility in water or whatever the case may be. But it is definitely an interesting point. It's like we're always learning more and more about like these terpenes and kind of where they end up in the class, like from an extraction point of view, because like you said, like we can like test for these banana terpenes and like cannabis. We don't really see it, but like when we smell it, we're like, this smells like some type of like banana identically. But it's like, where's that ester that we can say like, this is like from a botanical point of view, like this is the molecule that creates a banana flavor or banana smell, but we don't see it in cannabis. But when we break down some banana OG, you're like, bro, this smells like banana. So it's like, what is going on in here? Oh, yeah, 100%. It definitely is.
Our favorite plant can synthesize so many chemicals from across the planet. And so many different kinds of flora that are out there can all be like, have their profiles synthesized in cannabis. It's insane. Like,
Dude.
We chose the right plant, that's for sure.
I think the like cannabis plant probably has like the most like compounds going on in it, whether it's like terpenes or cannabinoids. There's so much happening in this plant. We're just like blessed by like, oh damn, like all these different flavors, and then like the breeders of the industry coming out with these new like flavor profiles. We're just like constantly like, man, what is going on inside this plant? But it definitely has a unique way of expressing herself. So we're just blessed to be able to work with her at the end of the day.
We had a quick question from Bruno. The question was,
How's it going? I'm Bruno. So I roll joints all the time. That's like my job. And people ask me all the time on how to store hash holes or infused pre-rolls, because it technically does have rosin in it. And I have I've recommended a couple of things, but I would like to know how should we be storing these new like hash holes? Because when you put them into these stores, I don't think the dispensaries are taking the same care that we would. So what are the recommendations on hash hole storage?
So technically, I have an infused pre-roll, solventless infused pre-roll. And what I typically do when it's coming to a retailer, they sign a disclosure. Basically, they're saying they're going to keep it cold. That way, when you receive it as a consumer, that you're getting what you see as advertised and everything's there. One thing I know about hash holes, any solventless thing, once that heat is introduced to it and you're pulling on it, that wax is going to break down. So best thing to do to store that would still be able to keep it out of the heat. So don't leave it in your fucking car. It's going to melt. It's going to tear up the papers, whatever the case may be. So just keep it at a regular temperature where it's not hot enough to actually melt the oil. And now you got a clog, crutch, trying to pull through, basically.
So just to add on that, since I do make recommendations on it, having it in like this position, like horizontal, leaving that at any time, leaving it like this over long periods of time will cause like rosin or any type of concentrate that's in the middle to settle over time.
It depends on how stable that rosin is inside of that, in that middle of the pre-roll.
True. And so I always do recommend just like having them stored like upright, like
Definitely.
so.
That'll work as well.
And keeping it cool and in a dark place.
Yes, keeping it cool is key to everything, especially like live rosin or any hash hole with something that's thick like that, because it'll tend, if you having it upright with the crutch is, sometimes it'll heat up and it'll just fall in that crutch, and you got to get the heat down at the bottom in order to get a pull, right? So you don't want to make sure you don't want to clog that hole unless you're using like a tip or something like that,
What about a fridge or a freezer, such as like how you store rosin?
What I've seen for refrigeration, if it's in something that's, where the air and the moisture, because there's a lot of humidity in freezers. If you got it in, not freezer, refrigerator, excuse me. If it's in a refrigerator, you tend to get a moisture content, condensation that builds up. So make sure it's just in, its original package. If you want to put it in the freezer, ideally is the best way to do it. You know what I mean? You preserve your terpenes 100% that way.
So a freezer would be okay? You just
100%.
throw it in the freezer?
Yes.
It's good for days.
All the time, every
Dope.
day.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
To piggyback onto that, what if you pull it out of the refrigerator or freezer and then bring it back in?
Taking it out of the freezer,
just
smoking
leave it in
it, putting it back in. You just
No. If it hasn't been consumed.
Just
If it's
leave it in the freezer.
just
till
leave it in
you're
the
ready to
freezer.
smoke it.
Yeah, just keep it at 32 below, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not gonna break down on you at that point, as long as it's frozen.
Keep it cold.
Question back here.
Keep it cold.
David, where are you from, sir?
My name is Justin. I'm actually here with the Miami Mango crew here. There's a few things I just wanted to touch base on just because I know talking to you guys and listening, obviously you're primarily ethanol. You've got a background in all solventless. I understand that from listening to you as well, but it doesn't seem that it's like your push right now. So a couple of the things that I heard, I just want to clarify and kind of put some clarity to it on the solventless side. One of the things was the actual yield. So the overall yields in solventless is going to obviously vary upon how you're selecting your material. And to go farther into that, you got to be real educated when you go to a hash maker. You got to find the right guy that's going to be honest with you, not just
Definitely.
looking for material at all times, but is going to be open and upfront with you with what that product's going to be capable of producing. And with that then comes that relationship that you guys are talking about building. So even though right now I know that he doesn't have type 6, it's going to be up to him if I walk in with a product that he knows market value wise or yield wise is going to perform better on the solventless side. It's up to him as the extraction artist to
Right.
make that call for that grower or for that person that's going to then have to sell that product, whether it be market value wise, the SKUs that they might be needing to fill on top of their distribution chain, or at that point, whatever the push of product line that he's got going on. So, you might have to educate the grower as they come to you sometimes, but that all comes with the whole territory of, again, building that relationship with the extractor. And then while we're talking about all different kinds of preservation of terpenes, it doesn't matter what they're doing. Your question was what temperatures? As low as possible.
Low as possible.
He hit that, but for all reasons, deterioration is real. So the colder that you're keeping it, you're stopping that deterioration from happening. Now, in any circumstance, it's going to help you with yield, and it's going to help terpene quality on whatever product is being produced. So if it goes to solventless as far as distillate, it's going to give him an overall better and cleaner product once he starts his process. It's not going to take as long and as much refinement. Less labor, more yield for you. So keep it as cold as possible. That was one of the things that I definitely wanted to touch base on. It doesn't matter whether it's trim, doesn't matter whether it's any type of lower biomass that you're keeping in there. You want to make sure that those are not only separated properly, because then again, if you're separating and you're talking to, he kind of touched base on this. If your grower is working with you properly, you should be separating your product properly. So you're going to have different types of biomass that's going to come. All those need to stay cold, but then we get to decipher then where you are going to get your best product line from based upon how that material is brought to us. When we implement our new space, one of the things that we're going to do with the cultivators that are working directly with us is actually a type of SOP where we go out to the farm or to the building, the facility, and actually go over an SOP on how to harvest this material properly and then preserve those terms properly for transportation so that when they come to us, I don't have to be the used car salesman in the deal. You guys grew this great product. It's dancing in the wind, and I always call it swinging dicks. Like it's at that last day when it's you're in there and you're so proud of these nugs that are swinging in the air. They're giving you that great smell. Our whole job is to preserve that smell and that taste and then the buzz. It doesn't matter what side, if it's him or if it's me or if it's this guy, doesn't matter what side we're going to go to with that. We just got to make sure that those terps are preserved properly. So if you can enact the proper SOP, there's a few things that we can go into and we can talk on it if you want to come over. But in the harvest side of things, what I like to call is a stress rest. So as you start to pull things from your plant, you have to allow those sites to actually have a time frame to close themselves off. And the reason being is if you start to harvest too early as you're pulling stalks and stems from this plant, what you're creating is open sites for chlorophyll to move. And we all know about the curing process when it comes to cannabis. If you're not curing properly and you're not allowing those chlorophylls to basically equalize throughout the plant, and this is all layman's terms, I'm not he actually started hitting me with some like super big terminology over here, and he lost me for a second. But this is just like, my little bit of botany background, horticulture background speaking. But you have to basically cure your product properly. You have to let that chlorophyll move. And that actually goes into the talk too about BHO and rosin. The curing of those two and the differences between what you're able to capture out of a fresh frozen product. Fresh frozen product that goes towards BHO, that's going to produce a lot of THCA, and it's going to lock out that THCA inside of like a boulder diamond-like form. And then it's also going to separate the terpenes as well. When it comes to rosin, those are going to be all mixed together, and they're actually, if done properly, going to go through a curing process. In that curing process, you're going to allow those terpenes that are basically sitting on top of the diamonds to mix adequately with the rest of the plant matter and create what that plant was actually adequately providing through the same type of curing process that you would go through if it was dry plant flower that we're getting ready to smoke. So the curing process is just as important, but again, this all stems back to going the right way with the product right from the jump, so that you're taking advantage of the proper terpene qualities. And as you guys are growing it, you're highlighting what the grower's doing, both in the smell and the taste, and then also the buzz that comes with that. Talking about those differences in curing, the buzz is going to be way different coming from a live resin product in the BHO side of things. It's going to be more live THCA side of things versus when you cure out a rosin properly over a couple week period of time in a cold cure kind of scenario. He's talking about like a batter. What happens is the terps coagulate with all of the rest of the plant matter and the THC and everything's there that's going to help basically mix them together. It gives you an opportunity then to blend those together, and you're going to basically experience a good mix of not only just the terpenes, but then also of the overall effect of what that plant was trying to give. And that's what we're trying to separate right from the jump. And then I got one more thing, and then I'll leave it at that. Don't ever be the used car salesman in the deal. So if you see something that's wrong up front, you smell something that's wrong up front, be open and honest with the guy that you're taking the material from. If you see that it's packed wrong or you're going to have a hard time processing it, say it up front so you don't have to explain it later. A lot of these guys as cultivators, they rely on us as extractors to pay the bills. So not only are they coming to us with their leftovers and with the stuff that really can make a difference on the market for them as far as SKUs, but they sometimes are really relying on it. So if you see something's wrong, educate these guys. Get them up to date, put them on game so that when it comes next time, and you still might have to help them out with the BS that they bring you, but be open and honest about it so when it comes next time, you can create a better product for them. That's going to be huge. And again, establishing that relationship and having these farms continuously come back to you on a monthly or a crop-like basis. And when it comes to facilities on this size, you're going to find that like crops are going to be like pretty much daily. So if you're setting yourself up with the right relationship, you're going to basically be able to feed your lab properly. And I appreciate you guys' time. I could talk on this all day. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're all like super passionate about the plant in this industry, whether it's cultivation, extraction. Like we love what we do at the end of the day, but you're on point with it. It's definitely about being like transparent. If a cultivator comes up to you and they're like, "Hey, we got like this papaya fresh frozen out of this room, super fire indoor," it's like, well, yeah, I want to run it through a hydrocarbon system, but like understanding the price per gram from finished products, it's like I'd say definitely go push that towards the solventless side of things. You're going to make a little bit more money at the end of the day, or get your price point, and that product SKU is like a hot topic in the market. So like get your brand kind of talked about and like get that whole aspect of things. So it's definitely need to be transparent with like your cultivation team and your cultivation partners, and beyond that too, being transparent about your yields and like helping them understand like why your yields are different, and like just working through the problems that like can arise in the field or in the extraction labs, but like also helping them like understand like if you do these few things, it makes my life so much easier. And just that two-way street at the end of the day is huge. And I feel like that's why we're like, it's good to have these type of events so we can have these type of conversations and really just kind of get everybody on the same page on like what we need to make you guys the best kind of products at the end of the day, because it varies. Like I'm not going to get like, oh, I got some fresh frozen, let's go turn it into distillate. It's like, what? Like that is insane. Like we got $2 a gram for that. We lost all of our terps. So it's really understanding and being transparent like where your biomass should go and needs to go as a cultivator. And the knowledge as extractors, we've seen so many batches of oil. So it's like we've worked through all these different kinks. We've seen all these different things. So it's like if we get a product that looks like this, here's going to be our output. And if you're okay with that as a cultivator because you don't have the space to have a couple chest freezers in your cultivation area because you're a smaller farm and you don't have that like minimum biomass requirement to keep it cold. So it's like there's things that we can do together, but at the end of the day, we need to just be open, honest, and transparent, and work together at the end of the day to make the best products. Because like you guys crush it in the cultivation rooms for weeks on end, and then it comes over to an extractor, and then it can like make or break that transaction relatively quickly. So that's definitely key in the industry. Dude, 100%. That's facts. Yeah, I appreciate all the sack cultivators coming out.
Real talk, shameless plug time. That slogan on the wall is not there just for a cool hurrah. That's why we're here, for this type of interaction. I'm stoked for that. Like, thank you guys for seriously being out, taking time out of a Tuesday to be here to talk about real shit that we want to do to make sure that the craft community stays together and we can actually do good things together. Quality is not easy. Straight up, like quality cannabis with whatever type of products you're talking about is not easy. This is how we get better, and this is how we align and continue to keep our doors open. Straight up. That was great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming out.
That was the Extraction Chronicles. Thank you, guys. Like, we've been waiting to do this talk for quite some time now, so we're going to have more extraction-focused discussions because, again, I'm biased to cultivation. It's the world I come from. But at the same time, this is the kind of stuff that we all need to work on together. So really looking forward to the next extraction-focused discussions. And again, thank you all for coming out to the Connect. We'll see you next month.